I never thought someone would look at me like that, not at this age, not like this. I was standing in the hallway, just outside the den, where the faint strumming of a guitar threaded through the air like smoke. My son's laughter bubbled up between the chords, light, unguarded. It had been a while since I'd heard that sound, since we'd heard music in this house at all. And then I turned. He was there, leaning against the doorframe, guitar still slung across his shoulder, one hand casually resting near the tuning pegs, the other tucked into his jacket pocket like he didn't know where else to put it. But his eyes were on me, not in the way most people look at single mothers, not with pity, or curiosity, or that careful distance, like grief might be contagious. No, he looked at me like I was music, like I was something rare and fragile that he didn't want to scare away by looking too long, but couldn't help staring at anyway. And just for a moment, I forgot how to breathe. I must have said something, offered coffee maybe, I don't remember. Only that his eyes lingered a beat longer than they should have. Only that his fingers brushed mine when I handed him the mug, and didn't quite pull away fast enough. Do you know what it's like, to be seen after so long? To feel someone's gaze not skim past you, not go through you, but land on you? It's terrifying, and addicting. Before I tell you how everything unfolded, how that look turned into something I couldn't undo, tell me this, have you ever been looked at like that? Like someone saw the parts of you even you forgot existed? Like someone knew how quiet your house had been at night, and was offering a song instead? Let me know where you're listening from. And if this story finds you at the edge of something dangerous and beautiful, stay, because what happened next? I'm still not sure I was ready. Grief has a way of folding time. Some days I still forget he's gone. I'll reach for my phone to text him something ridiculous, our son said, or wonder if he picked up coffee on his way home, and then it hits me like the second half of a breath I forgot to take. It's been 3 years. 3 years since Mark died on a rain-slick road coming home from work. 3 years since I sat across from a police officer who couldn't look me in the eye. 3 years since I became the widow, not Clara, not the woman who used to sing off-key while folding laundry, not the girl who once got drunk on sangria in Barcelona and danced barefoot in the street, just the widow with the quiet house, and mother of course. That part didn't die with him. Ethan was 7 when it happened. Small enough to still crawl into bed with me at night, old enough to know something terrible had changed, that we were now a house of 2, not 3. The first year I couldn't sleep without the television on. The second year, I forgot how to laugh. By the third year, I had perfected the art of invisibility. I knew exactly how to disappear in plain sight. At school drop-offs I'd smile and nod, but no one asked much anymore. I wore the same faded sweaters, kept my hair in a practical bun, shopped early to avoid conversations. My voice was used mostly for reminders. Put your shoes on, honey. Homework first. Dinner's ready. It wasn't martyrdom, just survival. Some women throw themselves into new hobbies, some redecorate, some chase something reckless to feel again. I organized spice racks, so when Ethan came home one day, breathless and red-faced, shouting about a new music program, I almost didn't listen. He had a flyer crumpled in his backpack. Mom, they're doing guitar now. Can I sign up, please? Mr. Felix says he used to be in a real band. Mr. Felix, that was the first time I heard his name. I met him a week later in the school gym. It was parents and practice night, a clever excuse to get parents to donate to the music fund and witness their children squeak through early chords. I didn't expect anything, just clapped politely with the other parents, sipped bitter coffee from a styrofoam cup, and tried not to cry when Ethan proudly plucked out the first half of Twinkle Twinkle. Then I saw him, standing off to the side, guitar slung across his back, tall frame, dressed in black jeans and a simple gray sweater. His hair was a little messy, but in a deliberate way, and his smile was soft, like he was always on the verge of laughing but never at you. And when he looked up at me, something shifted, not dramatically, not like lightning, just something in the air folded in half. He crossed the room after the practice ended, introduced himself. Felix Reyes, you must be Ethan's mom. He's got a good ear, rare for his age. I remember thinking how warm his voice was, low, gentle, like the slow strum of a familiar song. We talked for 5 minutes, maybe 7, just enough to learn he'd moved here last spring, had grown up in California, had a rescue dog named Moon Pie. I said I worked remotely, that I used to sing in college. He lit up. Really? You've got a voice then? I laughed. The sound caught me off guard. It's rusted over. He smiled at that. Sometimes those are the best kind. You just need the right melody. There was no reason for my heart to stutter at that. None. But it did. I told myself it was just kindness, just charm. Teachers have that, especially with parents. Still, I found myself volunteering to host one of the next lessons. If Ethan's okay with it, I said quickly. And you don't mind coming by? He didn't hesitate. I don't mind at all. That's how it started. One Thursday afternoon every week, Felix came to our house. He'd arrive just after 5 p.m., always a little windblown, always smelling faintly of clean laundry and cedarwood. He brought sheet music and snacks, never stayed past 6, professional, respectful. friendly, but there were moments, little ones. The way his gaze lingered half a second longer when I walked into the room. The way he leaned in when I spoke, like I had something important to say. The way he once asked if I still sang to Ethan at bedtime, and when I said no, he said softly, "Maybe you should again." And then, the hallway moment. The moment where I caught him looking at me like I wasn't invisible anymore, like I wasn't someone's widow, like I was a woman worth a second glance. That's when I knew this wasn't just friendly. That's when I remembered what it felt like to be seen. It was a Tuesday evening, the kind where the sky turns that soft velvet blue, and the air feels suspended, not quite warm, not yet cool. I'd just finished washing the dishes when Ethan came bouncing into the kitchen, cheeks pink from excitement. "Felix said you can come to the recital practice next week if you want. He said it helps when parents hear the progress." I dried my hands slowly. "Did he?" Ethan nodded, already distracted by something on his tablet. I don't think he meant anything by it. But that's how it started, how the space between music teacher and Felix began to change shape. I texted him later that night. Just a polite message. "Hey, Ethan mentioned I could drop by the practice next week. Let me know if there's a time that works." The typing dots appeared almost instantly. "Hey Clara. Of course, anytime. Actually, want to meet before? There's a little cafe near the school. Quiet, good coffee. I'll bring my guitar." I stared at the screen a little too long. My thumb hovered over the reply button. It was innocent. Just coffee. Just conversation. Still, I changed my shirt 3 times before I left the house that afternoon. The cafe was tucked behind a bookstore, dim and warm inside. All mismatched furniture and yellow lamplight. He was already there, sitting by the window, fingers idly strumming his guitar as if he'd forgotten he was doing it. He looked up and smiled when he saw me. That smile that always felt like a secret just between us. "You came." I sat across from him. I did. We talked. About Ethan, about music, about cities we'd both lived in. I told him I hadn't been to a live show in years. He looked at me carefully. "We should change that." There was a pause, one of those stretches of silence where something buzzes under the surface, waiting, and then he leaned back, guitar still in his lap. "Want to hear what we're working on?" "Of course." He began to play, a soft finger-picked melody that curled through the air like smoke. It wasn't anything famous. It sounded like something half-written, still blooming, but it filled the space between us in a way words couldn't. When he stopped, I realized I'd been holding my breath. "You wrote that?" I asked softly. He nodded, not quite meeting my eyes. "Working on it. Doesn't have a name yet." I said the first thing that came to mind. "It sounds like dusk." He looked at me, eyes narrowing slightly, like I'd just spoken a language only he understood. And then he smiled. "Yeah, it does." I thought that was it. Just a quiet, beautiful hour with music, and low light, and the kind of connection you don't want to name. But the next week, when he came for Ethan's lesson, it was raining. The kind of slow, steady rain that makes the world feel hushed. He knocked on the door holding his guitar case in one hand, and a folded-up umbrella in the other. His hoodie was damp at the shoulders, his hair mussed from the wind. "Hey," I said, stepping aside to let him in. "Hey." He smiled, dropping his bag by the door. "Sorry, didn't think it'd pour like this." Ethan ran down to greet him, already talking about the chords he practiced, tugging him toward the den. I made tea. And when the lesson was over, when Ethan went upstairs to shower, Felix lingered in the kitchen. He stood by the window, watching the rain slide down the glass. I handed him a mug. Our fingers touched again, the same kind of small contact that had started to feel enormous. "It's quiet here," he said after a moment. "It is. It's nice." I didn't answer, just sipped my tea, watching the rain. Then he turned to me. Something in his posture changed, more open, more vulnerable. "I meant what I said, you know." I looked at him, eyebrows raised. "About what?" "Your voice." He smiled gently. "I bet it hasn't rusted as much as you think." I felt the warmth rise in my chest. "It's been a long time." "Doesn't matter." He tilted his head. "Sing with me sometime." It wasn't a question. "Not really." He said it like a promise, like a door quietly opening between us. Later that night, after he left, I stood at the sink staring out into the dark yard, steam rising from the mug in my hands. My body was still, but my mind, my body memory, was not. There was a flicker inside me, something dormant but undeniable. It wasn't just the music, it wasn't just his kindness, it was the way he saw me, not as a mother, not as a ghost of who I used to be, but as someone becoming. It scared me, it thrilled me, and I wasn't sure how much longer I could pretend it wasn't happening. The thing about tension is, you don't always know when it begins. There isn't a sudden bell or a flash of lightning, no sirens, no warnings, just the way his hand started resting a second longer on Ethan's shoulder, the way his eyes flicked to me mid-lesson, as if to make sure I was still listening, still watching, and I always was. It wasn't just Thursday evenings anymore, sometimes Saturday mornings. A drop-off turned into a coffee, a shared walk from the school parking lot after the fundraiser. The line was still there, invisible, fragile, but unmistakably drawn. Neither of us had crossed it, but we both stood too close. The first time I realized something had truly shifted was a late Friday. Ethan had fallen asleep on the couch after movie night.
Felix was packing up his guitar in the den. "You can leave it here," I offered, gesturing toward the case. "No need to carry it back in the rain." He looked at me, then at the boy curled up under a blanket. "You sure?" I nodded. "He won't even notice it's gone." There was a pause, and then softly, "You?" I looked up, confused. "What?" He didn't repeat it, just watched me like he was memorizing my face. We ended up in the kitchen. Again, that had become our ritual, post-lesson tea. It gave us something to do with our hands while we tried not to say everything else we were feeling. He leaned against the counter. I stood near the sink, arms crossed loosely. We talked about the fundraiser, the kids, the ridiculous group rehearsal photo where everyone was blinking, but our voices were quieter than usual, closer to whispers. And then there was that pause again, the one that stretched, tensed, hummed. He set down his tea, his fingers curled around the edge of the counter. "You know," he began, and then stopped. "What?" I asked, barely above a breath. He swallowed. "Sometimes I feel like I shouldn't be here this late." I turned to face him, my heart beat in my throat. "And yet you are." His eyes met mine, quiet, burning. I know, there was no kiss, not that night, but the possibility of one hung between us like breath on a cold mirror. We didn't move, didn't speak, just stood there. Two adults, too old for games, too entangled to pretend anymore. Eventually he exhaled and looked away. The moment folded in on itself. I should go. I nodded, but didn't step back. He brushed past me gently, not by accident, his shoulder grazing mine, his hand resting briefly at the small of my back, just pressure, no motion, and then he was gone. After that night, I couldn't stop thinking about the way his voice changed when we were alone. Lower, warmer, like each word was chosen with care, and the way I started noticing how my own breath changed around him, how I smiled easier, laughed more freely, stood a little taller when I heard his car pull up. It was subtle, but undeniable. One Thursday, just as he was about to leave, he turned at the door. "Hey, I have a show this weekend. Nothing big, just a local set with a few friends." I tilted my head. "You still play?" He nodded. "Not often, but sometimes the fingers need to remember." "Where?" "Cafe Andante. It's tiny, probably crowded, but," he hesitated, "you'd be welcome, if you wanted to come." I didn't answer right away, but my pulse said yes before my mouth could. Saturday came. I wore a dress I hadn't touched in years. Just something soft, slate blue, with sleeves that fell just past my elbows. It made me feel like someone again. I told Ethan I was meeting a friend, which wasn't a lie. The cafe was already half full when I arrived. Warm light, laughter, dishes clinking in the kitchen. Felix was on stage with two others, guitar in his lap, head bowed. When he looked up, when he saw me, his smile changed. Not wider, not brighter, just realer, like I'd surprised him, and he was glad I did. His set was beautiful, lo-fi, unpolished, but intimate. He played one of the songs I'd heard in my kitchen, the one that had no name, and I knew, without him saying it, that he played it for me. I could feel it in the way his eyes skimmed the crowd but always returned to me, in the way his fingers lingered on the strings, like each note was meant to land softly on my skin. When it was over, I stayed. We didn't talk much, just sat side by side in a corner booth, close enough for our knees to touch. And when he leaned in, to whisper something about the last song, I think his breath grazed my ear, and I forgot where I was. I closed my eyes, not because I meant to, but because I couldn't not. When I opened them, he was watching me. That same look, the one from my hallway. Only this time, it was closer, hungrier, and still, neither of us moved. But the space between not yet and almost had never felt thinner. It happened on a Sunday, the kind of day where everything feels quiet, like the world itself is holding its breath.
Ethan was at his friend's house for a sleepover, his first in months. I'd packed his little overnight bag, slipped in a flashlight, and the comic book he always reread before bed, and waved goodbye from the porch. The house felt too still without him, too empty. I poured a glass of wine, lit a candle without thinking, then wandered the living room like a ghost in her own home. And maybe that's why I did it. Maybe that's why I texted him. "Ethan's out for the night." Strange kind of silence. "Hope your Sunday's treating you better." He replied almost instantly. "I was just thinking about that song you named, Dusk." "You were right. It stuck." I smiled, typed back. "You playing tonight?" "Yeah. Want to come by?" "Just music. No lesson, no agenda. Just music." I repeated silently, staring at the screen, and then I said yes. When he opened the door, his smile was softer than usual, almost unsure. He'd changed out of his usual dark clothes, wearing a worn navy t-shirt and loose cotton joggers. No pretense, just real. "Hi," he said. I stepped inside. "Hi." He led me to the living room. The space was dim, scattered with sheet music, cables, a mug half full on the windowsill. It looked like he'd been in the middle of something when I texted. He picked up his guitar, his fingers finding their places like they'd lived there all their lives, and began to play. Not the song I knew, something slower, barely formed. I sank into the couch, tucking my legs up, letting the sound curl around me like smoke, and for a while, that's all there was. Just him, just music, just us. At some point he stopped, let the silence settle. Then he set the guitar down, leaned back in the armchair, and looked at me. Really looked. "You feel it too, right?" he asked quietly. My pulse stilled. I didn't pretend not to know what he meant. I couldn't. Not anymore. I swallowed. Yes. His shoulders dropped with that one word. Not relaxed, exactly, but like he could finally exhale. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "I wasn't going to say anything," he said. "I was trying to be respectful, careful. I told myself it was just admiration, just music." He looked at his hands, then at me. "But Clara, I've thought about you, more than I should." My breath caught. He was still speaking, low, careful, controlled. "Not just because of how you look though, God, that's part of it. But because when I play, you're the one I picture listening, like you're the only one who'd hear it the way it was meant to be heard." The words didn't feel rehearsed. They didn't feel like lines. They felt like they had been aching inside him. I didn't know what to say, so I did the only thing I could. I told the truth. "I've thought about you too," I whispered. He closed his eyes at that, just for a moment, like it physically hit him. When he opened them again, his voice was even softer. "But this, whatever this is, we both know it's not simple." I nodded. "No, it's not." There was Ethan. There was the age difference, the history, the expectations, the fact that he was supposed to be a part of my son's world, not mine. But I couldn't unknow the way my body leaned toward him when he entered a room, or the way my heart felt younger, rawer, more awake after every interaction. And I couldn't unknow this, that being near him made me feel alive again, not like someone slowly fading in a quiet house. He stood up slowly, walked to the window. Rain tapped gently against the glass. He didn't turn around when he said it. "I don't want to be just another ache in your life." My voice barely made it out. "You're not." He turned then, his eyes full of something I couldn't name. Longing, fear, restraint, want. "Then what are we doing?" he asked. I didn't have an answer. Not yet. So instead, I crossed the room slowly, like stepping through fog. I stood in front of him, close enough to feel the heat between our bodies, but not touching. I looked up, held his gaze. "I don't know what this is," I said, "but I don't want to pretend it's nothing anymore." He reached out, not to touch me, but to hover his hand near mine, close, trembling, waiting for permission. I nodded. He laced our fingers together. That was all. Just hands, held quietly, in the middle of the storm, but it was more intimate than any kiss I'd had in years. I didn't expect him to kiss me that night, but I wanted it. In that slow, terrifying, soul-deep way that doesn't burn hot, but aches. We were still in his living room, standing by the window, hands gently threaded together like we'd just promised something we didn't have words for. Neither of us moved at first. We just stayed. I think he was afraid I'd flinch, and I think I was afraid I wouldn't. But then I looked at him, really looked, and I saw it. Not just want, not just admiration, but the restraint it took to hold back. That's what made me move. I reached up first, only to touch his face, to trace the stubble along his jaw with the backs of my fingers. It wasn't bold. It wasn't planned. It was instinct. He closed his eyes, leaned into my hand like it was the only thing keeping him grounded. "Clara," he whispered, my name a tremble, a prayer, a question. "Yes," I breathed, not even knowing what I was answering. And that's when he kissed me, so slowly I thought I imagined it at first. His lips brushed mine like a secret, like he wanted to give me a moment to change my mind. But I didn't. I pressed back, tentatively, then with more certainty, and the dam broke. His hands slid up, one cradling my cheek, the other curling around my waist. He kissed me like he'd been thinking about it for months. And maybe he had. God knows I had. My own hands found the hem of his shirt, fisting into the soft cotton, just to anchor myself. There was nothing rushed. No sharp breaths or fast hands. Just a slow unraveling, thread by thread of whatever careful boundaries we'd built. His lips traced the corner of my mouth, then down to my jaw, then paused at my neck. And when he whispered there, "Tell me to stop and I will," it nearly undid me. But I didn't tell him to stop. I pulled him closer. We never made it to the bedroom. The couch, dim lamplight, the rain against the windows. He kissed me like he wanted to learn my sadness, not erase it. Like he wanted to understand where I'd cracked and kiss every fracture with care. His fingers didn't rush. They trailed along the curve of my waist, slipped under the fabric of my shirt as though asking permission with every inch. We were still mostly dressed, still half in denial, but everything was louder. My breathing, his heartbeat, the sound of my name on his lips. It was the way he looked at me when I let the shirt fall to the floor, like he'd never seen anything more beautiful, not because of perfection, but because I was real. There were moments I almost said something, to ask what this meant, where we were going, but the words wouldn't form, because this wasn't about clarity, it was about feeling. When his hand slid across my ribcage and stilled, when his mouth traced the hollow beneath my collarbone, I felt my body say something my voice couldn't. "I want this. I want you." Later, we lay tangled on the couch, half covered by a throw blanket, the room thick with silence. Not awkward, not heavy, just full. His fingers traced slow lines on my forearm. I stared at the ceiling, trying to remember how to breathe in a world where he was no longer just an idea I tried not to think about. "I didn't plan this," I whispered. "I know.
This wasn't supposed to happen, I know. And then, quieter, more afraid. But I don't regret it. He turned his head toward me, brushing my cheek with his lips. Me neither. We didn't sleep. Not really. We stayed curled into each other, half in the dark, half in something we couldn't name. It wasn't sex. Not in the way people talk about it. It was something else. Something slower, more intimate, more forbidden, and impossibly, breathtakingly, real.
Morning came too soon. I hadn't slept. Not really. I think I drifted in and out, floating between moments where his breath warmed my collarbone and the sound of rain softened into memory. The room was different in daylight, too honest, too still. I sat up carefully, wrapping the blanket around myself like armor. Felix was still asleep beside me, one arm bent beneath his head, lashes dark against his cheek. He looked younger in sleep. Or maybe I looked older in the morning light. I reached for my phone. 2 missed messages. One from Ethan's friend's mom. He had a great time. We'll drop him off around 10. The other just a photo. Ethan grinning with a marshmallow half melted on a stick. Innocent. Pure. I felt a sharp ache behind my ribs. This, whatever last night was, existed in a different orbit. One that couldn't survive under fluorescent kitchen lights or next to a lunchbox on the counter. Felix stirred. His eyes opened slowly, landing on me with a kind of softness that nearly undid me. "Hey," he said, voice still husky with sleep. "Hey." He sat up, rubbing the back of his neck. His shirt had shifted, collar tugged low on one side. I had the sudden vivid memory of my fingers doing that. We both stayed quiet. There was no guilt, not exactly, but there was weight. He seemed to feel it too. "Was that a mistake?" he asked gently, not accusing, just honest. I looked down at my hands. "No," I said, "but I don't know what it was either." He nodded. "Me neither." He reached over and touched my wrist, not to hold, just to remind me he was still there. "You don't have to decide anything right now," he said. "We can figure it out." Slowly. I looked at him then, really looked. The way he didn't flinch from silence. The way he always met my uncertainty with stillness, not fear. It scared me how much I wanted to believe him. He left before Ethan got home. Not rushed, not secretive, just respectful. He kissed my cheek at the door. "I'll see you Thursday," he said softly. The line again, still there, blurring now. That afternoon while Ethan napped on the couch, I stood at the kitchen sink, staring into the backyard. The wind pushed gently through the trees. A forgotten swing creaked once. My body still remembered his touch. My skin still carried the shape of his hands. My lips still burned where he'd pressed his mouth to mine like I was something sacred. And yet, I also felt suspended. In the ache of wanting something I couldn't name. In the fear that if I touched it again, I wouldn't be able to let go. That night, after Ethan was asleep, I sat in bed with the light off. I picked up my phone, opened our thread. No new messages, but the last one was still there. Just music. No agenda. I thought about replying, then closed the app. Not because I didn't want to speak to him, but because some silences deserve space. Some feelings need room to breathe. And I needed to figure out who I was in the morning light, not just who I was with him. There are moments I return to, uninvited. The rain tapping the windows, the hush before he kissed me, the sound of my name on his breath. They come back when I'm folding laundry, when I'm picking Ethan up from school, when I pass the guitar case still leaning against the den wall. Little echoes, soft reminders. It's not obsession, it's not regret, it's memory, and it's proof. Proof that I felt something, proof that I was seen, and wanted, and chosen. Not because I was someone's mother, or someone's wife, but because I was me. We never defined what happened that night. We didn't draw a map, but something shifted. We crossed a line that wasn't supposed to be crossed, and no amount of silence could uncross it. He still comes every Thursday, still teaches Ethan with the same gentleness, still glances at me when he thinks I'm not watching, and sometimes, just sometimes, I look back, not with shame, not with apology, but with the quiet understanding that something began that night, and it's still unfolding. I don't know what this is. I don't know what it will become, but I know what it isn't. It isn't forgettable. It isn't meaningless. It isn't nothing. And pretending it didn't happen, that's no longer possible. If you've ever been seen by someone when you thought no one was looking, if you've ever felt a kind of intimacy that scared you more than it thrilled you, you're not alone. This story isn't about scandal. It's about awakening. It's about remembering parts of yourself that life buried beneath laundry, grief, and responsibility. And sometimes, it takes someone unexpected to hold up a mirror, to say without saying, you're still in there, that you're still worthy of being looked at like you're the only one in the room. So if you're listening to this right now with a knot in your chest, if you've ever had a forbidden almost, a breathless maybe, drop a 4 to the comments. Tell me, did you ever cross the line? Or did the silence speak louder than anything else ever could? And if you want to hear how this story unfolded next, what happened after the couch, the kiss, the Thursdays, let me know, because not every ending is final. Some stories don't close, they echo.